Hello, everyone. It is time for another Ask the Question Customs Manager. So you ask the question and I answer it. So the question we've received from Anna, she's in the US. How do the latest US tariff changes impact my business? And what should I do to stay compliant and competitive? Oh, Anna, what a question. How am I supposed to answer that if I don't even know what your industry is? Look, besides, the tariff changes all the time. There is new announcement on US tariffs, then there are counter tariffs. It is going back and forth constantly. By the time I am recording this situation could have already changed. So how do I reply to this without knowing what sector you're in? And to make it relevant for the time that you are watching this, because the time you're watching this is different from when I'm recording it. It doesn't matter. Generally speaking, look, tariffs are a cost and they impact a business across basically most industries, depending on if the tariff is specific to a product such as steel and aluminum or broad. What is interesting is that one country can impose a tariff and the other country reacts with counter tariffs in a completely different sector, like we've seen with steel and aluminum. So one country imposes additional duties on steel and aluminum. The other countries or region of countries react, um, targeting different sets of products that impact the original country, if you kind of follow what I'm saying. But overall, when tariffs are at play, whether they are countermeasures or there are measures, we could say that this affects your business if you are cross-border trading, meaning crossing the border. Then you're most affected if you're importing or exporting. Of course, you could argue that even if you're not directly in the importing and exporting business, creating, say, steel and then selling it to a wholesaler who then sells it on and eventually it will like be exported or imported will also matter. In short, tariffs matter. Tariffs impact economies, businesses, mostly internationally trading, but as I've just explained, also potentially domestically. So, what are the areas I would look at, regardless of what your business is? I'd look at obviously the cost impact and the pricing strategy. So first, directly, will the tariffs lead to increased import costs? Higher tariffs directly raise the cost of imported goods, and that could squeeze profit margin. Then the next area within this cost element would be the negotiations that you might need to have with the supplier. You might need to engage with your supplier to explore any cost sharing or discounts or alternative procurement terms. So when the costs at import grow, who's going to pick up the bill? So talk to your supplier. Think about pass-through costs as well. So evaluate whether to absorb the additional costs or pass them on to the customers. So this is the other end. One is what about the extra cost and the impact on your suppliers, those that supply you the goods, for example, from Europe sending goods to the United States, you're now hit with additional duty. Are you going to ask the supplier? Or pass-through cost, are you passing these on to the customers? And maybe you can explore added value offerings to justify the price adjustment. So you need to raise the prices, increase the price. So is there something you can offer to the customer in order to justify this price increase? So the first part I would look at, if you are affected by tariffs, is what impact on cost. Next, what impact on my supply chain? And would I need to make in the short, medium, or long term sourcing adjustments? So step one, if I am hit with a tariff upon import, and this is specific to a region, I look at supply diversification. So if you're relying on a single country for sourcing, this could be risky. So explore alternative suppliers in tariff-friendly regions or in maybe FTA, free trade agreement countries, would be my advice. Think about nearshoring and friendshoring. So now we are thinking about relocation production, if this is a long-term thing. So could you bring production closer to home? Could you bring it to allied nation? That's friendshoring, right? So that you have a better trading relationship. I mean, if, for example, the focus is on producing locally, so producing within America, for example, well, can you bring it back home? It was in Thailand, can it come back? Or can it come to a allied country? If there are still any allied countries left, of course. And then, of course, another thing to think about when we talk about supply chain, the second element is really foreign trade zones. Are you importing into FTZs to delay or reduce or eliminate the tariff costs? And are they available and what kind of specific conditions? So the second aspect after cost is supply chain. The third one is compliance, in my opinion, trade compliance and regulatory consideration. So tariff exclusions and refunds, that's a really US specific thing, but please do check if this is specific to the US, whether your goods qualify for exclusions, exemptions, or refund programs such as duty drawback. You might wish to, in this context, compliance, trade requirements, also look at the harmonized tariff schedule and do a code review. You might want to ensure that that the products are correctly classified. And what would happen if you said, "Ah, I misclassified this. This is actually not a product falling under the additional duties because I did a mistake in the classification." Fancy that. No. So do double check that your HTS codes are actually correct. Look at anti-dumping duty and countervailing duties, so AVD and CVDs. Be aware that some of your products or products general have these specific goods, have specific duties when the goods are deemed unfairly subsidized or priced below market value, then they are usually hit with an ADD or a CVD. So if that's the fact, then you need to pay special attention to those because that will bump up your tariff. So you could be facing ADD duty, CVD duty, and additional duty. And then basically you're out because you can't pay all this duty unless you can pass it on or claim it back. So third is look at and have a look at the trade compliance and the regulation. Fourth thing I would check, or fourth element I would check, is the impact that these measures have on the trading partner. So imagine your country is imposing additional duties. Now that means, and if you're then onshoring or bringing it production to host, that means you lose the ability to produce outside, say the US, and therefore there will be retaliation measures. So there is a retaliation risk. Foreign retaliation. Countries affected by the US tariff, for example, may impose or have imposed retaliation duties, which could harm American exporters. So that would be negative for your exports, should you have any. Then that would by itself then lead you to market diversification. You may then have to consider alternative markets with lower trade barriers. And again, here looking at trade agreements, leveraging those might be the way to go if they are available. Now, the US unfortunately doesn't have trade agreements with the European Union, but there is a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, and that is already quite important because as you've seen in the recent developments, those that import under USMCA have a preferential duty than those that don't. Those that don't will be hit with full additional duty, and those that import under USMCA won't. Finally, my final suggestion would be on strategic policy consideration. So you you might need to scrutinize policies carefully and evaluate the impact. So executive orders, memos, fact sheets, all of that. You need to get really into it and understand what it all means, understand the dates when something will be applicable, and understand the broader context, meaning, why is this happening? What is the purpose of it? What is the aim of it? So is it to rebalance the trade that is deemed unfair, or is it for any other domestic or international goal? So developments need to be monitored closely. And of course, you know that we do that every week for you. It's called the Customs Watch USA and the Customs Watch EU UK, our flagship magazines, which have a very low price. And every week you get it all in one document, right? Then we look at LinkedIn, we look at all the other things, and all you need to do is just read that, and that's it. Yeah. Then consider also lobbying and advocacy, right? Engage maybe with industry association. Have a call with me to see what we can do together. You wanna advocate for policies that benefit your business, of course. And of course, there needs to be a long-term strategy as well. For example, consider whether tariff changes that are occurring could mean a broader change in shift in trade relationship and trade policy. And with the second Trump administration, for example, you could clearly see that there is a complete change from what was one policy to a different. So what, in conclusion, would I recommend are your next steps? Well, look, as I said, assess the tariff impact first of all, see how you are impacted by this, how much money is at stake. Then look at the costs, maybe explore alternative sourcing for the products to mitigate these risks. Maybe also, now not maybe, obviously stay ahead with legislative and regulatory changes and seek professional guidance. So you can always schedule a free call with me. Just go to www.customsmanager.org and book that. Optimize your tariff classification would be next. So tariff codes, HTS codes, and then explore, of course, duty savings opportunities. I've already mentioned. You can either eliminate the duty altogether, you can reduce the duty, or you can postpone, delay the duty. So all of that is available, and we just need to go through all the tools and understand what applies to you, what is the best strategy for you. And then so we're doing classification, we're doing costs, we're doing supply chain, we're doing impact on the exporter, the US exporter, and retaliation risk. We're looking then finally at strategic and policy consideration, and that would also mean engage yourself in trade policy discussions to stay ahead of future changes and maybe influence the debate with lobbying activities. Does that help you as a answer? So I hope that was helpful to you. And if it was helpful to you, then maybe it was also helpful to other people that are watching this. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was very useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and do let me have your comments. It's always appreciated. And don't forget, if you have a question, please get in contact with me. Either write the question in the comments or email at info@customsmanager.org. And then at the next video, we'll pick it up again. Thank you so much. Bye bye.